Dr. Jamal Barzinji was born on December the 15th, 1939 in Mosul, Iraq. On the night of his birth, Sheikh Muhammad al-Barzinji, his father, made the following entry in his diary. "It was a bitter cold night, and a son was born to me. I have named him Jamal al-Din." Sheikh Muhammad instilled in his young son a deep and abiding love for Allah and Islam, a deep love and appreciation for the Arabic language, and a deep respect and devotion for truth and values.
I met Dr. Jamal 1955. We were like 15 years old at the high school in Mosul, Iraq. He was very intelligent, one of the top in the class, and he was involved in activism defending the Arab cause in the Middle East. He participated actively in some demonstrations against the injustices of the government at that time.
Dr. Barzinji grew up in this loving and religious environment until he left for England in 1958, where he got his bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and fuel technology from the University of Sheffield. He graduated in 1962. While in England, Dr. Barzinji was active in Muslim student affairs and helped found the Muslim Student Society in the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland with Dr. Hisham Al-Talib and Dr. Ahmed Tatonji.
To us, it was something new in our country, in Iraq. No organizations were allowed for people to form. It was only government and whatever they say, and that's it. In England, it gave us a chance for us to develop our capabilities in such a way that not only we will be useful to ourselves, but also to the world at large.
We visited the Islamic Center in London and discovered that there is a need for an Islamic Student Association. We conducted several training programs in the vacation time between Christmas and the New Year in Liverpool, and then in Sheffield, and then in Birmingham.
Dr. Barzinji came to the United States in September 1969. He completed his master's degree in chemical engineering from Louisiana State University and his PhD in 1974 in chemical engineering. While pursuing his studies, he became active in the Muslim Students Association of the U.S. and Canada from 1970 to 1977, where he was chairman of the Publications Committee and member of the Planning and Reorganization Committee.
That was the first time I met him at the Executive Committee meeting of MSA. And one thing that I noticed about him, at least in my interaction with him, was that whenever you take some work to him that he had assigned you or you had been assigned, and you did it satisfactorily, he would always say, "That's how I wanted it." That was kind of a typical thing he would say, meaning to say that he had certain standards that you had met.
When the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA, evolved from the MSA, Dr. Barzinji became chairman of its planning committee and served as member of its Majlis al-Shura from 1984 to 1992.
In one of my interactions with Dr. Jamal Barzinji, he once said, every single Muslim in North America belongs to two organizations. One is his own, and the other one is Islamic Society of North America. I believe individuals like myself are direct beneficiaries of the sacrifices that these great leaders made in the early 60s and 70s. So today we miss him, but we also know that he is at a better place, and there is hundreds and thousands of people who every day make dua for this man, for his contribution to Islamic work.
In 1972, he was a founding member and member of the Executive Committee of the Association of Muslim Social Scientists. He was a founding member and general manager of the North American Islamic Trust, established in Indianapolis from 1973 to 1994. During that time, he pioneered the development of the Waqf concept that was new to the Muslim minorities in the West He also worked with legal, financial, and regulatory experts to establish an equivalent of Islamic waqf that is to be entrusted with mosques, centers, and other community-based assets. Dr. Jamal Barzinji was a man of many talents. In the financial sector, he left his mark on many well-established organizations. He was also a founding member and member of the Board of Trustees for CAIR Foundation in Herndon, Virginia, from 1983 to 1995. He pioneered the establishment of a dynamic Muslim endowment and charity with focus on improving the quality of life through education, training, technology, and human development. In addition, he headed the fundraising, project development, and investment of the Foundation's capital funds of $100 million and supervised educational, relief, and industrial projects in 15 countries. His role in endowment and charitable organizations was not limited to those in the U.S. only, but he was also a founding member and member of the Planning Committee for International Islamic Charitable Organization in Kuwait in 1984. Dr. Barzinji was president and chairman of the board of directors of Marjack Poultry from 1984 to 2015. He negotiated the acquisition of a troubled poultry operation and oversaw its development into an industry standard operation totally integrated with the American poultry industry and rated #1 bottom line profit and quality, processing 2 million birds per week. From 1986 to 2015, he was president and founding member of the Board of Trustees of Safa Trust, where he led a team to establish and develop a tax-exempt entity to provide financial stability and self-sufficiency for IIIT. Dr. Jamal was a founding member, president, advisor, and member of the board of directors of Amana Mutual Funds, the first Sharia-compliant mutual fund from 1986 to 2003. He was a member of the board of directors from 1994 to 2002 at the Bank Islam Malaysia. In the scholarly field, Dr. Barzinji was a founding member of the Board of Trustees of the International Institute of Islamic Thought, located in Herndon, Virginia. And from its establishment in 1981 until his death in 2015, he was vice president and chairman of the Research and Publications Committee. At IIIT, Dr. Barzinji led the team from concept development to establishment and growth of some 20 affiliates around the world, making IIIT the leading Muslim intellectual organization in the world.
We cannot understand what IIIT achieved or how the Islamic activities in the U.S. Without knowing the role of Dr. Jamal Barzinji.
Dr. Jamal struck me as a visionary who was also very practical and detail-oriented. He struck me as a leader who had belief in people, who tried to teach people, to develop them, and bring out the best that they had.
As chairman of Research and Publications, he managed the publication of over 600 titles, primarily in Arabic and English, and 21 other world languages of scholarly and specialized academic work. He also developed and managed the production of 2 international journals titled American Journal of Islamic Social Sciences in English and Islamiyat al-Ma'rifa in Arabic.
Dr. Jamal Barzinji has demonstrated through his work that he's not just a man of faith, but also a man of action. And he demonstrated his faith convictions in what he did, from the MSA to NATE to the Islamic Society of North America to IIIT itself. He contributed significantly to the building of institutions that have at its core a message of faith.
Both of us wanted to see IIIT books on a par with the best books published by any publisher, and I believe with the support of Dr. Jamal, with his encouragement, with his contribution to all the discussions we used to have about almost every single title, we have managed to do that, and we are very proud that we have set a bar.
Dr. Barzinji's distinctive scholarly contribution is evident in his role as Dean of School of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences from 1994 to 1998 at the International Islamic University, Malaysia.
My first knowledge of Dr. Jamal was as a student, when I was a student at the International Islamic University, Malaysia. And he was the Dean of the faculty, Kuliya of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences, where I was a student. And I remember from time to time as a student, you may need to go and see the Dean or the Assistant Dean to get a signature for something. And I remember people would tell me, you know, if you need to go to the Dean's office, don't go to Dr. Jamal. He's very, very tough. So he had this, people had this image of him as very tough, but I can see now that I know him better where that comes from. It comes from his very principled commitment to things. And he wasn't someone who you just schmooze into doing something. He really would ask follow-up questions. He would ask you why you want to do this. Is this good for you? Then he would give you an advice. He was somebody who was very committed. He was very warm. He liked good joke. He would laugh. He appreciated language play, things like that. That's something that he really liked. But not many people had the opportunity to know him that closely to understand this. So all they could see is this veneer of a serious person who is committed to his work and asks tough questions, which he did, but he needed to, because that was part of what he was doing.
From 2011 to 2015, Dr. Barzinji was an advisory board member in the search committee in the IIIT Chair for Islamic Studies, George Mason University.
What I know of Jamal's incredible work, and in particular with the International Institute for Islamic Thought, became a significant force in education about Islam, Islamic thought, Muslim issues globally.
His political contributions were numerous. In the late 1990s, the U.S. State Department created a roundtable on religious freedom. Dr. Jamal was an active participant and made substantial contribution in the State Department Roundtable Discussion Group on Religious Freedom. Dr. Barzinji, with Dr. Al-Alwani, offered to develop a new teaching program for Islamic studies in the Muslim world. Likewise, in 2001, after the events of September 11, President Bush met with a group of 10 prominent American Muslim leaders at the Islamic Center in Washington, D.C. Dr. Barzinji discussed the impact of the event on the Muslim community and how the administration and the Muslim community could cooperate at that sensitive time.
When we met with President Bush after 9/11, the White House invited a few Muslim leaders. Dr. Jamal Barzinji and myself were included in that meeting. And I observed Dr. Jamal Barzinji's interaction with President Bush. He was very assertive. He focused on the bigger picture, on the contribution American Muslims had. And he reminded the president that it is very important, as he would go in minutes later to address the press and talk to the nation about American Muslims, that he should not forget the contribution American Muslims have, not only on the national scene, but on the global scene. Several of us were talking about also the immediate issues. Dr. Jamal Barzinji kept in mind the long-term issue when he engaged President Bush.
In recognition of his countless contributions in scholarship, reform of education, political engagement, community involvement, and more, Dr. Barzinji received several awards. In 2007, he was the recipient of the first Faith in Action Award by the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy in Washington, D.C.
In talking about Dr. Barzinji, one can't help but talk about the kinds of qualities that give you encouragement that human beings can actually do a lot better than they typically do. I mean, he was the height of not only professional insight, but he really had a heart for the lot of the people. I mean, he suffered when people suffered overseas in the Middle East region with the refugees, and especially in his home country But he was a man of great gifts, but matched by a very deep sense of humility, and the kind of humility that inspires others to want to follow. And I consider him a real beacon. He did so much for Islam and reminded one of when Islam was at its peak.
We in Clergy Beyond Borders, my partners, met Dr. Jamal Barzinji through his work in IIIT and his very strong interest in supporting interfaith dialogue and interfaith encounter in the Washington area and indeed throughout the world. He was a wonderful, strong and modest person at one and the same time. When I think of him, I think of a blessing in my tradition where we say when we meet a very wise person. I felt he was part of the ulama, even though he was a scientist and a businessman. We learned tremendous amount from him. He had a tremendous amount of wisdom, insight, and kindness in a combination that I don't think I've ever met in another human being. We admired him, we admired his work, and he was very interested in the interfaith dialogue and interfaith encounter.
Dr. Jamal was very aware of how one has to talk to people who don't know about Islam. So always remembering that one has to find people where they are, speak to them, show them what's good about the culture, about the religion, about the human beings, and try to help them become more interested in these different projects. And by them, I mean mainly non-Muslims who might be otherwise hostile or at the very least not interested.
During its 45th annual convention in Columbus, Ohio in 2008, the Islamic Society of North America awarded him the annual Dr. Mahbub Khan Community Service Award. In September 29, 2012, Dr. Barzinji received CAIR's Life Achievement Award.
In my work, I always needed someone, an older person I can rely on. And Dr. Jamal Barzinji always reminded me of my father. Because Dr. Jamal Barzinji was always calm, collected, and patient. He would be the last person to make a comment, but his comment will just be inclusive and will just comprehend and just cover all the issues. Whenever he deliberated, he will deliberate and show patience, wisdom, and vast experience that life has taught him. And I always say that he was a big picture man.
In 2014, he received the Adams Award.
Dr. Jamal Barzinji, considered one of the great pioneers in the Muslim community. He is the one who initiated, with a group of other brothers and sisters, major organizations in the United States. Also have contributed a lot to my community, to Adams Center. He has a great positive impact, very humble, down to earth, highly intellectual, very genuine, very generous. Dr. Jamal Barzinji have embodied many good qualities that impacted many young people in my community.
Dr. Jamal also contributed significantly to establishing the first center, which was the launching pad, if you will, for our Adams Center, to push us always to improve our services, to improve the image of the center, the looks of it. He had made sure that he leave us in his legacy a significant contribution so that we see the completion of Phase 3 in Adams.
Dr. Barzinji delivered his last public address at the opening ceremony of Adams Center's third phase construction in 2015.
There was a time when we had our principal, Sheikh Taha Jabir Al-Alwani here, may Allah Ta'ala bless him and grant him strength and health, where they pioneered, they sensed what the community is going to need in the next few years, and they collected the best brains of scholars, traditional scholars, to say, this is what Islam demands of us.
This address capped his lifelong effort to improve the lives and potential of Muslim communities wherever he could, cementing his legacy of leadership and service to all whose path he crossed.
جمال كان خلقه القرآن، بمعنى أنه حمل كل الصفات الجيدة، كونه هادئ حليم كاظم للغيظ صبور محب رؤوف يحب أسرته.
The institutions and the organizations that he set up, I think they were his life, they were his legacy. From the time that he moved from Iraq to England and then back to Iraq and then eventually to the US, he was consumed by this spirit of founding organizations which would lead to change, which would lead to revolution in thought and understanding of Islam, and ultimately bringing Muslims closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was consumed by this idea, and you can see it in the fact that over the past 50, 60 years in the US, there is no large Muslim institution that he didn't have some sort of role, whether it was peripheral or direct. And that really was his greater calling, that he gave his life for that.